I think, Colin, you said at one stage, private equity doesn't have to be cold. It can be a partnership at best.
I just operate a little bit differently because I have different incentive structures, and I love these businesses. Like, I really enjoy it. And I think that's maybe a little bit of the difference with all the new entrants is they look at it like an asset class, it's like a spreadsheet, right? And these aren't spreadsheets. Like, they're real people, and you're effectively changing their lives.
Welcome to the $100 Million Mindset, the source for business owners who aspire to scale, grow, and reach their full potential. Whether you're aiming for 5 million, 10 million, or 100 million. Your hosts are Alan O'Neill, the Irish plumber, who scaled Abacus Plumbing and Cooling to over 100 million, and Toad Liquor Todd Liles, a coach to high-performing business leaders and the owner of Service Excellence, are going to help you think bigger, act smarter, and take your business to the next level.
Today's guest was in the trades before the trades were cool in private equity. Collin Hathaway was the first person to invest in Abacus, helping me launch what was one of the most iconic home service brands in America. He's a quiet force behind some of the industry's biggest moves, Guardian Roofing, the Wrench Group, and more. But what makes Collin different is how personal it is all still for him. He doesn't just invest, he partners. Collin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's the first time I've ever been called a quiet force.
Yeah.
My wife would disagree with that, but
I might disagree with it a little bit myself at times.
It is sort of funny. I've only seen the quiet reserve side of you, but I have heard that you can get animated when things don't go well.
Yeah. Yes.
Is that the
True.
appropriate way to put that?
Yeah.
It might be, yeah.
I can get animated in general, but yeah, if things aren't going that great, tends to show up more often.
We got a whole bunch of questions that we're going to jump into, but we'll get into those in just a moment. I have a few personal questions to kick off. I want to know if you're still an avid runner.
I am. Yeah, I just ran this morning.
Did you? If I remember, I think you were good to run 5 miles almost every day.
Yeah, now it's typically 3 or 4, but yeah, and then I've started lifting weights a lot more as you get older.
I can tell you look really jacked. You look just...
Yeah. But yeah, this camera angle is great. Just like shoulders and above.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Good. That's fantastic. All right, now we'll jump into some actual content here.
Sure.
Going through and listening to some of the other shows and reading some of the articles that you've been referenced in, one of the things that keeps coming up is sort of common here, which is I wasn't chasing a trend. I was chasing people and chasing performance. Now, you have the Stanford football helmet behind you. I think I saw the chapel hidden by your head briefly. If you move to the side, is that the Stanford chapel behind you?
No,
it's not.
San Francisco area. It's the Ferry Building and then the Golden Gate Bridge.
Golden Gate Bridge. Okay, so I just saw it briefly there, but I don't know if you know this. My father-in-law coached football at Stanford, so my wife and them lived there for a little bit. But what I really want to get to is coming from Stanford, Ivy League on the West Coast, you decided to go into the trades. What pulled you in that direction?
It wasn't like I set out to get into the trades, and I certainly never envisioned what it would become today in today's market. I knew that I had worked in a private equity firm where I was the sourcing person, meaning like I had to go find deals for us to invest in. And there were so many good companies that were under 3 million of profit or 2 million of profit that just got ignored. And private equity has become much more robust and sort of pervasive now than it was at the time. And so I just saw this opportunity and said, hey, there's these small companies that no one's paying attention to. And I decided to start a little firm to go look for them out of business school in 2007. And then I met the Bonnies, Candy and Mark Bonney of Bonney Plumbing. It was a $7.5 million residential plumbing and sewer shop. And I decided to try and partner up with them. And my friends from business school were apoplectic. Like, they're like, what are you doing? And I said, well,
I'm glad you explained what that meant.
Yeah. Apoplectic, freaking out, curious. So they said, why would you ever buy a plumbing company? And I was like, well, it's close. I can drive there from where I was living at the time. Like, the Bonnies are awesome. They're going to keep 20% and help me. And you guys all say a recession's coming. Like, I'm pretty sure toilets still break in a recession. And they're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'm like, well, I don't really have a backup plan. And I need to buy a company to make this work. And they're great. And so I bought it in March of '08. I bought 80% of it. And Bear Stearns went under 2 weeks later, and the great financial crisis started. So, and from there, it was, I mean, I thought we grew 3% a year, but actually I went back and looked and we grew 50% between 8, 9, and 10, which is great. Then I did a bad deal outside the trades, and I thought Skylight, my little firm, was going to not work. And so I figured I might as well try one more, and happened to find a company in Dallas called Berkey's. And then it just went on from there.
Yeah, Colin, take us back to that moment. I know the dates very well. It was Cinco de Mayo 2011 that you you bought Berkey's, and then February 12th, I believe, you closed on Abacus in 2012. What was it that about those two companies that made you want to partner?
Well, they were different stories. I mean, Berkey's. So in 2010, we had moved home to Seattle. My wife and I had our first child. We have 2 kids, and I had Bonnie that was going pretty well in Sacramento, and I had bought this company in Utah in the mining services space that had gone horribly wrong. The owner had committed fraud and forged ocean records, and it was using hookers and blow to buy off mining clients. He was a devout Mormon guy.
Sounds fairly normal, Colin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if you ever need to pop profit, hookers and blow works, but only for like a short period of time. And it stopped working right after I bought it. So I figured out what he was doing. So Berkey's was more of the last ditch. It's a neat company. It's in a great market. And I want to try and do something that will actually work to prove that this model of buying small businesses will help. And at the start, it looked great. I mean, I bought it in, you said, Cinco de Mayo. And then I don't know if you remember, but 2011, there was like 2 things working for us. It was 100 days of 100-degree weather in Dallas. So all my investors were like, "You're so smart." I'm like, "I know, I'm so smart," because we just sold a ton. And then Obama had like those rebates, and so like it was like pulling forward all this stuff into 2011 before the rebates went away. And then when I met you, it was totally different because I'd been in the trades for 4 or 5 years, and I'd never seen. And I started to talk to people and started to meet other owners and see other companies. And I'd already met Paul Kelly at Parker and Sons, and I just never seen anything like what you had built. I mean, you had a $9 million plumbing and sewer shop that you'd grown $1 million a year every year. And I still talk about it. You had those plumbing service agreements. Alan had the most ingenious plumbing service agreements. And I don't want to ruin your secrets, but he had like 2,000 plumbing service agreements. I have tried to replicate this thing like 10 different times, and I've never been able to do it ever. Everyone's like, "Oh, we could do that." I'm like, "Okay, try it." And then never seen it work as good as what Abacus did. So, and you didn't do any air conditioning. Plus we hit it off from the get go. And if I remember right, like didn't we talk once, and then you came to Dallas, and then we enjoyed it a lot, and then we went back to the conference room and whiteboarded the deal in like 5 minutes, and then that was basically the deal.
That's exactly what happened, Colin. Yeah, I went to Berkey's. I found like a very similar culture, I thought, to what we had at Abacus, and then we went into the Bill's office.
Training room.
Yeah,
it was like the training room in the back. I think.
That's right. And you whiteboarded the deal, and I kind of secretly thought you were a little crazy because the numbers just looked bizarre, what we could do in the future, and it turned out to even be better than that. But yeah, it was a fairly easy deal. Yeah.
Whiteboards are powerful. And when I raised the money to do Flink Group, the first like slide deck I sent out to investors was just a picture of my whiteboard, and I think I raised half the money that way.
Wow.
So
wow.
Yeah. You've got my brain spinning because I was going to ask you questions about hesitations into getting into the trades, but now you're talking about mining companies and hookers and blow. And I mean, I'm just imagining you walking in one day to do due diligence, and he's popping his head off of a booty, and he's got a cocaine mustache. I mean, there's just all sorts of.
No. And then he did a better job hiding it from me. Although he did take us to his favorite hotel. And he got me a room that had like a jacuzzi in it with mirrors on the ceiling. And I was like, "Oh, this guy's like he was from Utah." And I'm like, "This must be just the only hotel you can stay at." But it was not. And I should have had like some light bulbs go off. I was like, this is a peculiar room.
That is so great. So I guess I'll get serious now. I am going to alter my question. You say whiteboards are actually powerful, and this isn't anywhere on here, so I'm going to flip the script here.
Yeah.
Talk to me about why you think that method works as opposed to someone putting together 20 slide decks and coming in with this massive presentation. I'm going to take an hour and a half. Was it because that it was obvious on the board, or was it because you had a relationship with them, or was it a little bit of both?
I think well, Alan can answer too. I mean, I think a little bit's the formation of the relationship, but I think I think something that a lot of people get wrong is you don't have to things aren't that complicated. Like I just try and keep it really simple and try and make sure whatever I'm saying is easy for everyone to understand because then it means I understand it. And so, I mean, the deal structures I use are not very complicated. Um, you know, in talking with owners and people who are excellent at one thing, they may not have ever sold their company before. So you want to make sure you're not sort of trying to bring the shock and awe, or I want to make sure I'm not trying to bring the shock and awe. I also can't use PowerPoint. I don't know how to do it. So shorter is better for me. So whiteboard works just fine. I also just think in general, I mean, I just mentioned I used the whiteboard to raise a bunch of the money for Flint Group. Eventually I had a PowerPoint. I had to pay somebody to do that. But and then at Guardian Roofing, when we bought it, I remember it was 10 million of revenue, maybe a couple $100,000 of profit. And in like the first week I went in and we were talking and I got up on the whiteboard, I wrote 30 and they said, "What's that?" I said, "Oh, that's going to be our revenue." They said, "How long?" I said, 5 years. I said, "How are we going to do that?" I was like, "I have no idea." And you know what? We missed it. We hit 29 million in 6. So, but we just kept talking about it. I was like, this is our goal. This is our goal. And then you sort of figure out the pieces around it. So I just think people make things way too complicated. I mean, there's that really cool quote, I think by Mark Twain, where he's like, "I wanted to write you a short letter, but I didn't have enough time. So I wrote you a long one." And I just try and be succinct and thoughtful about communication, how I write, how I talk. Because I think a lot of times people think more is better, and I think sometimes it's just more.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Colin, like to tell it like it is, you're coming into an industry, especially back then, that was fairly unsophisticated. And had you come in and be throwing spreadsheets around and you know, I don't know, you would have connected as well with the owners as you did with me, certainly. And I think it was very easy to understand what you were suggesting. The deal wasn't complicated at the time. It was very easy to understand. It was very clear that we were on the same page right from the start. So it was a fairly easy deal for me to make my mind up about when I was considering partnering with Colin. So I think that's important too. I think, you know, had you used the word like apoplectic or whatever you said earlier on, I think the deal would have been done. But no, all joking apart, I think keeping it simple and making it very easy for the owners to understand what the potential is. I mean, and it is potential, because if you're not willing to work at it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, for sure, I think that was very important.
All right, and feedback received. I'll keep all two syllables maximum. I got it.
There we go.
Have you seen Severance, Colin?
Movie?
The TV show on Apple.
Yeah, I've seen it.
No.
Really good.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, this is just for Alan and I. It just reminded me of the guy going, simpler,
Yeah, simpler.
smaller words. All right.
So, Colin, when do you think you realized this wasn't just one or two investments, but the start of a movement of private equity getting into the trades?
Oh, I mean, it was much, much later. Well, so I think there's two parts of it. I mean, if you go back to 2012 when we partnered up, I mean, there wasn't people buying plumbing companies or air conditioning companies. I mean, it was maybe me and ARS, right? And me was like Bonnie, Berkey's, Abacus. And Berkey's and Abacus were tied together in the same ownership group. Bonnie was separate. I think it was when we had some issues with Berkey's. the owner who had sold to us was part of the company, and then he left, and it created a little bit of a kerfuffle. Are we cool with that? Like a little bit of a some issues. Yeah, kerfuffle. Yeah, some issues. And so Alan and I worked at that for a year or two, and at the time, Abacus was growing like crazy, and then Berkey started growing like crazy. I mean, Abacus grew from 9 to 30 million in like 3.5, 4 years, and Berkey's grew from 9 to 22 million. But it's and then Paul Kelly, who I'd known for a long time, joined our group, and suddenly we were like $100 million group of 3 companies. I mean, that's when I started to think, hey, this might work. But I still didn't think, oh gosh, well, we're going to go and sell this thing, create Wrench Group. Unfortunately, Alpine Investors, who was my biggest backer at the time, basically prematurely forced the sale, and that was kind of the start of the things. But I don't even think it really led to like the private equity onslaught until Wrench sold. So we sold in 2016. We had added Cool Ray joined our group, Ken Haynes. We sold in 2016. I got pushed out by the New York private equity group that bought us. And then when Wrench, it became Wrench Group. And when it sold in 2019, I think that's when like this started. But I still didn't really, I mean, I never would have envisioned what it's like now with like 80 something private equity backed consolidation plays. Just like I wouldn't have envisioned there's like a dozen or 24 groups trying to do it in roofing. I bought into Guardian Roofing in December of 2016. I wasn't like, oh gosh, I bet this will become a huge play.
Collin, in a moment we're going to get into your relationship with private equity and your personal touch, and I think that is something that makes you stand out. Like I didn't realize this is sort of a aha moment for me because I was working with you, and then you guys invited me to
met.
Yeah, and then you guys invited me to work with Berkey's and then Guardian. So
Yep.
Thank you. I didn't realize I was part of the early movement, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But here's my question for you. And this isn't on the list, but you brought it up. You said you got pushed out. That doesn't sound pleasant. Can you unpack that experience and what you learned from it?
Yeah. I mean, I think I realized that I didn't have as much control as I thought I did. I mean, I had a backer in Alpine at the time, and I had worked there many years before, and I'd worked closely with the founder, and we'd had a bit of a falling out that contributed to me having a heart attack when I was 36, and then they said, "Hey, what do you think about selling Abacus, Berkey's, and Parker and Son?" And I said, "I do not want to sell. Like, I have the best owners that I've partnered with. Like, we're growing like crazy." And they said, "Well, we're going to sell." And I said, "I don't want to." They said, "Yeah, well, we are." So that was at that time. I think Alpine and me had run our course, so it was fine to sell. I mean, think about the owners that were in that group: Ken Haynes, Alan O'Neill, Paul Kelly. I mean, if you're going to get like a top 10 list of owners, I mean, you'd add like Geiger, Hiller, but that's pretty good. I mean, that's like 3 of the 10 best owners in the country in our little group, right? To start with. And we should have kept going, right? I mean, we sold for 200 million, and 3 years later, it sold for 750 million. So, it was just too early. And then, the New York firm, I just kind of saw what big private equity does, both in pushing for the exit and then also just basically to get a return so they could raise more money for their next fund. And then, the New York firm had an idea of how they wanted to do it, involved me moving. And I said, "I'm not moving." And they said, "Okay, then we don't need you anymore." I was fancy fired. They're like, "You can be on the board." I said, "I'm already on the board." They're like, "Yeah, well, just the board." And that was it.
I will tell you that I appreciate the way that you're answering these questions, and it's the main reason why I wanted you on here is because I've always felt like you brought a little bit more of a personal touch, and I've really just in visiting with Alan and other people, Matt and Lori, who I really adore. They see you as a partner, not someone that's just a private equity guy putting money into it. I got to ask another question, if you
Sure.
don't mind.
Yeah, we're quite.
What type of heart attack did you have at 36?
I had a soft plaque rupture. Thankfully, I knew what it was right as it happened, because I have some genetically high cholesterol stuff in my family and heart attacks, and I chewed up baby aspirin and called 911 and got a stent, and I was out of the hospital the next day. But I think it was stress related. I mean, I was relatively healthy, pretty young, and I just again mentioned I'd had like this pretty big conflict. It got resolved, and 10 days later, I had the heart attack.
Was insane, and it probably was inflammation stress related.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can have whole.
So, uh, yeah, no, it's all good. I mean, I just think I don't know that I would change anything. I mean, I'm grateful for how everything started. I'm grateful for the support I got from the founder of Alpine and Alpine. I'm grateful for how it worked, and everything kind of works like it's supposed to. It was not a particularly pleasant time, but at the same time, the silver lining for me is like in 2011, I had like 15 grand, a 3-month old, in a rental house. And my friend's like, "Oh, a rental house," and I'm like, "No, not an income property. I rent the house. Like I'm not, like I have like 5 months rent." And so like when Ranch sold in 16, I made some money and I finally felt safe. And like so it there was a benefit to me. It just would have been a lot of fun to keep doing it together. And the relationship with Alan and Paul was pretty special, and it would have been cool to keep having that.
Well,
Yeah.
that blows my mind to think that in 2011 he had $15,000.
Yeah. He never told me that. I thought he was a
Oh
million.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You don't lead with that when you're
Yeah.
trying to buy a company for a couple
Yeah.
million that
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
barely make rent. There's something you want to be honest. You just don't need to be fully honest. Because guess what? If it worked, I wouldn't have 15 grand, and it worked, so it's fine.
Well, I think one of the great things for me was, a friendship came with the partnership, and you know, as I said, Colin and I hit it off like pretty much from the first meeting in my office in Houston, and then of course we went to Dallas and subsequently did the deal. But I think, Colin, you said at one stage, private equity doesn't have to be cold; it can be a partnership at best. And for me, it always felt like a partnership, Todd. Like I didn't feel like I had a boss, even though like technically I reported to Colin. Um, so, Colin, how would you describe your relationship with private equity today?
I mean, I don't, I don't know that the relationship, like, I don't have a relationship with it. I think I've entered private equity with in 2002. So it's 2000. I mean, I've been doing this for like 23 years, some variation of this. But I think private equity, so private equity can mean a lot of things. It can be venture capital, it can be lending, but in the sense that we talk about it in the trades, it's usually like buying the companies and put them all in a big group. I just operate a little bit differently because I have different incentive structures and I have a different makeup. I mean, a private equity firm raises 100 million or $1 billion, and then they want to have 10 investment platforms, and they want to go out and build them as fast as they can, and then they want to sell them. And private equity is paid. I mean, your listeners may know all this, but they're paid basically two ways. They get a 1% or 2% of whatever money they've raised. So 100 million, you get 2 million a year. If you raise a billion, you get 20 million. And then they get 20% of whatever profits they return. And so that's just how it works. And then so they're actually incentivized, and then they're graded on how much money they return and how fast they do it. And the fast part is actually kind of key. There's this measurement called IRR, internal rate of return, that's time based. It's how, like, if you have $100 and you return $300 in 2 years, that's way better than returning $400 in 6 years because of the time. And so there's like an incentive, right? If you have a higher IRR, you can raise more money. The money generates higher management fees. So that's just not how it works for me. I mean, I didn't have money to start, so I had to raise money for each deal, which meant each deal had to work. And I kind of like being in these businesses, so the longer I'm in them, the better off I am. So it just doesn't. I just operate a little bit differently.
Your investment strategy, and you gave a fast overview. We appreciate that. I appreciate that on a number of reasons, because I think that quick overview that you just gave is one of the reasons why private equity makes a lot of money, but it's one of the reasons why it also just rips the soul out of a lot of companies too. And I just
Yeah.
fundamentally believe that. I stand by that, even though I know there are certain people that might be listening to this that dislike that statement. But so I have to ask the question then. When you look at your investment approach, it sounds like you're hanging. Well, it doesn't just sound like you are hanging on to companies for a longer period of time. I'm curious how you're raising money. Are you going to family groups that buy into this longer approach? Today, maybe you've got the money, but you didn't initially. So obviously, you raised it with Alpine, and you made
hmm
that clear how that went. But how are you raising money today for your potential mergers?
Well, I mean, one is I just don't do that many of them. So I don't have to go out and raise money a ton. I mean, with Berkey's, it was Alpine and 5 other wealthy individuals. I mean, it was the fast answer is however I can. That's how it started. I mean, when I bought Bonnie Plumbing, it was right before the great financial crisis. And I talked to 78 lenders and one said yes. And it was Bridge Bank's technology group in San Jose. And I said, hey, you're the tech group. Can you do this deal? It's a plumbing company. They said, does it have a website? I said, yes. They're like, yes. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is not like a real. Okay. I'm like, I'm not going to say anything, but that's crazy. And the website wasn't even very good. So it used to be however I could. And part of my job or role at the time was just talking to a ton of people, telling what I was doing so that then when I had something at Berkey's and Abacus at Parker and Sons, because it was, and Alan probably doesn't know this, like Parker and Sons, because of some of the issues we'd had with Alpine, or I'd had, I wasn't sure Parker and Sons was going to join our group because I was going to maybe go raise money to buy them separately. And so like then I'd have to go out and raise money differently again. So it's kind of however you can do it. Guardian, it was just my wife and I, and then Matt and Lori. It was a smaller company, and I could put some money in, and then I invited some people in to the deal to join us, guys with Irish fake accents and so forth. And then, well, I took him out. He was not he was not that helpful. So
I got a
he never
nice
got on a
I
roof.
got a nice
Yeah,
return for not being
he got,
helpful, Colin. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. He never got on a roof. He didn't do anything. And then with Flint, it was partly I'd had a track record. I'd already done it in plumbing, and so that time around, I wanted to actually have a fund, and so I wouldn't have to go past the hat every time. And I mean, it's interesting. Thought I was going to try and raise 20 million bucks, and I had 45 million of interest in like 2 weeks. And some of that's people I've been talking to forever. It was wealthy individuals, it was search fund investors, it was family office people. But the story was pretty compelling, and ultimately, I didn't hold the company forever. I'm still the second biggest shareholder. But there's other reasons for why I did that, but it generated pretty good returns. So for investors, and we did it the right way.
Colin, there's a growing sense that PE can feel extractive. How do you avoid that?
And when you say extractive, do you mean it's kind of that ripping the soul out thing you were talking about? Yeah. I mean, I think so. I guess I'll give you two responses to that. One, I think it depends on how you mean extractive. I mean, if a $1 million profit plumbing company could sell for $10 million today, that doesn't feel that extractive. I mean, if anything, it feels like the owner is extracting more than, I mean, because it used to be 4 to 6 times. Now it's not, it's 8 to 10. So, I think people can bitch and moan that private equity is awful, but it's given owners of plumbing and air conditioning companies, roofing companies, a way to really monetize their wealth in a way that I don't think has ever existed before. So I think in some sense, I'm like, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I mean, I don't like it because I wish it was still normal pricing for normal businesses, but it is what it is, Now, the flip side is, I just told you, I mean, private equity is paid to make the biggest amount of money possible as fast as possible. People respond to incentives, financial incentives, and that's their financial incentive. So if the goal was to make as much money as possible, period, I think you'd see longer hold periods. I think this, and I think I don't think a lot of people in private equity today, I mean, a lot of them have grown up. I mean, I graduated in the 2000 dot-com bust, the 2000 business school. I graduated in 2007 great financial crisis. A lot of people investing today have only seen 2010 through 2024, 5. It's been a pretty good run where everything kind of did up and to the right. And so I think people probably, I just don't think they care as much about the cultural element, which I think is interesting because I always tell people, like, I respond to financial incentives too. I care a lot about our companies, but I always say just follow the money. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, if you don't trust me, assume I'm the worst human being ever. What happens if my company's culture gets totally screwed up? They're like, that'd be really bad. I said, yeah. And that would make the company less valuable. So just assume, like, I want the company to be more valuable. I'm going to try not to screw up the culture and hopefully be a pretty good person on the way. But I don't know that if everybody understands that.
Yeah, I think it always depends on the private equity company too, Colin. Like, I would say my experience has been extremely positive for the most part. Like, given a lot of autonomy. 13 years later, I'm still involved. Which I know is not the norm. But I think it depends on the company. I think it depends on the amount of autonomy an owner will still have. I think it depends on his relationship with the people he reports to, and it's not one size fits all for sure. Yeah. So
it also depends on what your goals are. Like if you're just going to sell and retire, you care about your team, but like, someone says, I'll give you 10 million or 5 million. I care about my team like $500,000, but not 5 million, so like, so you just take the highest price and you leave. So, but I mean, we've had a tremendously positive experience. General Atlantic's our partner in Flint Group, and they've been phenomenal. But we also, we talked to 20 buyers and we talked to investors and we talked to a couple that you could see early on, like it was going to be real challenging to work with them.
So let's talk about that in terms of the people that you partner with, because I know Alan very well. I know Matt. I know Lori very well. I know Aaron very well. I don't know Billy very well, but I know Billy. I know a lot of the people that you're connected with, and I think for a really long time, Wrench Group has been known as carrying on the legacy of picking up good people. Mm-hmm. I also know there are certain people that your partnerships didn't work out too great with. I'm not going to put any of those guys on blast. Instead, what I'm going to do is just ask, like, how do you know when this person's going to be a good partner? How does it align for you? And in some cases where you're like, I'm good to partner with that person, but that person's got to go. I can't do this deal if he stays. So how do you know those things, or what's your personal, I don't know if it's your character diamond or your filter. There's something there that either you were trained on it or it's instinctive to you, and I'm curious what it is.
Yeah, well, if you have a fake Irish accent and you say tree instead of three, you're in for sure. That's the auto filter. So, I think so my first job was in sales, and I was selling telecom services that were new. And so I had to do, you had to figure out a way to build a relationship pretty quickly and figure out what that person wanted. And I think it served me pretty well. I mean, it's not I'd like to think it's not like the finger pistols salesy approach, but so I think partly is trying to connect as quickly as possible. I mean, I don't do I'm not doing 100 of these things. So it's a little bit, I don't have to, I only have to figure out one neat partnership every little bit. So I think it's just trying to figure out if you can connect. And the reality is, like, you're buying the business. So you hope the partnership works. But like if there was a terrible type of company that I didn't want to be part of and I really connected with the owner, I probably wouldn't, I wouldn't do that. So the owner is, at first it's like, do you like the business? Do you think it'll work? And then it's like, do you like the owner? And there it's kind of figuring out how do they talk to their employees? How do they, and you don't always get to see it, but how do they talk about the customers? How do they talk about their family? Do they offer healthcare? I've had owners say, like, yeah, we don't offer any healthcare. It's great. And I'm like, that's not great. That's not like showing that you're super compassionate about the needs of your employees. But that's very telling, so how does the bathroom look at the shop? It's a plumbing company. It actually should look pretty good. Maybe not the one in the warehouse, which always looks bad, but everyone, there should be one nice bathroom. So there's some scary warehouse bathrooms. Um, so, I think there's different ways to do it, but again, and you don't have a ton of time. I mean, you have time over the 60 days to sort of vet your initial thought, but you have to kind of decide pretty quick and figure out if you can connect. And usually there's signs. I mean, like Billy Stevens left Berkey's, and it wasn't great how it happened. Like but he had said, I don't want to stay. And then he saw how it was with the Bonnies and said, I'll stay. And he kept some of the company. And then, but he didn't really, I think he just didn't really want to. He just didn't want to, it's kind of like tricky when you sell. Do you want to stay? Do you want to go? Do you want to keep ownership or not? And so that was like me hoping he would stay and want to work together like Alan and I did. But he'd already sort of said he didn't want to. So like I should have just been more receptive to what he said initially because he knew. And then I was trying to believe what I wanted to believe, and so, it just depends. And there were warning signs with the Utah guy and, Flynn had a bad investment. Well, we ended up making 2 times our money, but we bought it from a convicted felon. I knew he was a felon. He told me a story. I was like, oh, that seems reasonable. Well, it turns out that's not a good idea to buy from a convicted felon. And so like most of the bad ones, like I could have avoided.
Colin, why have you chosen to stay closely involved with companies like Guardian Roofing? And I know Matt and Laurie, so I think I know the answer to this, but tell us why you've stayed involved with companies like Guardian.
Well, I love these businesses. Like I really enjoy it. And I think that's one of the differences, I think, in maybe my approach or why I feel so lucky is like I really enjoy these types of companies. I love being the meetings. I love working with you. I love working with Lori and Matt. They've been phenomenal partners. And it's neat to be a part of it. I mean, it's neat to see Guardian Roofing sponsoring the Little League. It's neat to, where my son played. It's neat to see our friends that need help asking for help from companies you own. And so I enjoy it. I mean, every day is not joyful. There's stuff that comes up, but I just think it's really rewarding. And I think that's maybe a little bit of the difference with all the new entrants is they look at it like an asset class, it's like a spreadsheet, right? And these aren't spreadsheets. Like they're real people and you're effectively changing their lives. I mean, I've told the story before about Manny. I mean, Alan had this kid pick me up at the DoubleTree that I stayed at in Houston, which was fancy, by the way, because I finally was able to not Priceline a hotel and stay at the Red Line. And it wasn't a fancy DoubleTree. It's just fancy that I got to actually book a hotel.
How does Starbucks, Colin?
Yeah, it had Starbucks, a gym, and a restaurant and bar. It was like heaven. And
chocolate chip cookies.
And chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah, and the chocolate chip cookies. That's right. And so Manny would pick me up, and I'd always be sweaty because I'd run. In Houston, you never stop sweating until you leave. And I'd talk to him, and he's like, I'd ask him questions, and I think he was like 19 or 21. He was a plumbing apprentice, and I don't know what he made, like 19 or $22 an hour or something, which is like 40 grand. And in the time I was working with Alan, he became a licensed plumber, made 6 figures, had a baby, bought a house, got married, and we made money off Manny, and he changed his life. And what was you always had like 3 wishes for people when they left.
Yeah, well, we want them to improve as a technician. We want them to become a better husband, a better dad, and, just become a better person. And we want to leave them more financially stable than when they started with us. So they were the 3 promises, basically, that we make them when they start.
Yeah. And so like there it was. There it was in one person. So that's pretty neat, right? And Guardian Roofing in Seattle has created like 80 jobs, 80 real jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty neat.
That is very neat.
It is.
Well, we're talking a little bit about partnership, and you're naturally taking us there. It's clear that you see partnerships as not just a number. So I'm gonna give you a chance to brag on Alan a little bit. What stood about Alan? What about Alan really stood out?
Oh my gosh. So he had made that. So like Alan started with a partner. I love his story because he's like, yeah, we started Abacus with 2 leaders and no workers. And like, then he got his first call and he had like, the other guy couldn't do any work. So Alan had to go do it, but he didn't have any tools. And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Really well thought out. That's like how I'd start a company. It's good. So the grit of building something from scratch. I mean, we're doing this with Guardian Roofing right now in Portland, Oregon. Starting something from scratch is hard. And so to do that and be so consistent, I've never seen anyone kind of hold a room. I've still told the story when you did the training class and you talked about going to the bathroom lavatory on an airplane after someone had peed all over that lavatory, but there was a woman coming behind you and you knew you had to clean it up because she think you did it. And they said, what was the point of the story? I'm like, I have no idea. I still don't even know what he was talking, but like I was riveted to the story for like 10 minutes. Like, I don't even know what the point is.
I'm
just
not
like
even
still
sure I
remember the
knew what
story.
the point was. Go on.
Yeah. I don't know. It was like maybe like take care of your business or do stuff you got. I don't know what it was, but I was like, it was great. And we had like 60 people in there and they're just like, this story's amazing. I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. He's also come out as a leprechaun in a celebration. And Alan is still the only person when we had like a holiday thing. We had like 10 people won like a raffle or some shit. And like some guys got some tools and some guys got some flat screens and 3 guys got P tests to go get drug tested. And I was like, Alan, you can't get P tests as in like a Christmas party. He's like, I don't know. We need to get 3 random. So I got them. And I was like, that is awful. That's like, so, yeah. So I mean, it was just fun. And we always trusted each other. I think we had 2 conflicts. One was over this thing, networking capital. When we did that was just like, I didn't explain it very well. And it's kind of this really opaque thing that you never have to think about until you're selling your company. That was one, but we resolved it. I remember I was in the Sacramento airport, resolved it in like 10 minutes or a day. The other one is Alpine asked me to grade our team A through F. And I gave Alan an A-, and he lost his shit. He was like, A-? I was like, well, I think you're not, we just started working together. And he's like, oh my God. And I was like, okay, I've never done that since. I've never been like, let's.
We had just grown 30% in the first year, and Colin gives me an A-, and I'm like, okay, how do you get an A+? Like, what do you have to do? So, anyway, we resolved it. Yeah.
I've never used that actually. I'm like, you guys do this a lot? And they're like, oh yeah. And I was like, that's I'm never using that again. That was horrible.
You've worked closely with Matt and Laurie at Guardian, Colin. What do you think makes them world-class partners?
Well, they care a ton. They've worked their tails off. They've trusted me. I trusted them. I mean, there was a period of time when I was the CEO of Flint that I didn't hardly go around Guardian, and they did a great job. I mean, we grew from 10 to 29 million through COVID. But it's interesting to bring it back to you. I mean, one of the things they asked is like, how do we be good partners? Like, what would make us good partners? And I referenced the work with Alan. I just said, we worked together, we communicated really clearly. We had tough conversations when we needed to. We generally got aligned and then made, move forward. But I said, Alan is one of the best leaders I've ever seen at change management. And they said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, it just means like, you're always kind of looking to get better and stuff changes. I mean, you grow from 10 to 30 million, you can still be a great company with a great culture, but there's going to be new people and processes. And I mean, I still remember that when I was either on the way out or, I think we bought Baker Brothers and I think I left French, but Baker Brothers had a different way of dispatching plumbers or managing plumbers than Abacus did. And I would say Abacus was probably the best plumbing company in the country. And Alan's like, hey, that seems like it might work better. And in like 30 days, he switched the entire structure of the plumbing department. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Like, it's already working really well. Like, you don't have to change it. But he's like, this will scale better, it'll be easier. And so I think Laurie and Matt did a really good job. I mean, there were a couple times right after COVID, we realized our sales team wasn't scaling really well. And we invested a ton of money in the sales system we use at a time where we didn't have to. And it's really allowed us to scale even further and faster. And then even last year, or a year and a half ago, they said, hey, there's this new product we could sell in the gutters. We should try it. And I just said, okay. And the legal agreement, our attorney's like, this is like a 50-year-old agreement. It's horrible. You shouldn't sign this. I said, well, what do y'all think? And they said, let's just do it. So we did. And it's one of our fastest growing departments.
Colin, I there was a question you used to ask me when we worked together that has always kind of stood out in my mind as been a really great question. It was, do you feel safe and happy? And it covers so much. And I think I remember asking Colin. In fact, I think we were at the Cheesecake Factory in Dallas
South Lake.
having dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Colin used to call it the 10,000 calorie restaurant, but
It is.
we were sitting there one night having dinner, and I asked Colin, like, why do you ask that question, or where did you get that question? Colin referenced a class he did in Stanford on feelings, if I'm remembering it properly, Colin. But it is such I mean, it's not the kind of question you would expect a private equity guy, and I don't think Colin is your typical private equity guy by any means, but it's such a great question, and I've used that question myself since, because it really gets people to open up, I think, and I would, can honestly say I never felt unsafe or unhappy working with Colin. But I think it's a great question, Colin. I hope you're still using it because it's very powerful, I think.
There's a huge danger in asking that question.
You might actually hear the truth.
You might hear the truth,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And like, as soon as you said it, I found myself going, wow, that is powerful on so many relationship levels. Could you imagine asking your anxious son that question, do you feel safe and happy? And them saying no, how heartbreaking that would be.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, but would you rather know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's
100%.
Yeah.
that's what's the feedback I got one time. I remember Candy Bonnie said, I'm getting to like you always. I have an issue. I said, what's that? She's like, you always like take the elephant and just like throw it on the table. I'm like, well, if there was an elephant on the table, wouldn't you want to know? And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I would. And I mean, I think they don't eat you, but they might. And I mean, I don't know if I ask it quite as often. I think I internalize it. I mean, that's if you don't feel safe, you kind of can't do anything, And it doesn't mean and you're not always happy, but if you're unhappy, I mean, both lead to pretty bad outcomes, right? And so, and you just don't have to operate in that environment, I mean, I don't want to feel. I mean, I've only felt unsafe one time, and it didn't end that good for me. So, like in a work setting, and so, I had a heart attack. So, like, I think I just never want anyone to feel that way, and I don't think you have to. And I think a lot of times part of feeling unsafe is that people don't communicate very well, and they're not very transparent. And I'd much rather have like the bad stuff out there because people can take bad news. I think it's the uncertainty that drives people crazy.
For sure, it's
Yeah.
what's not said. I want to piggyback on that because there is something that I've heard really more like a rumor. I don't know if it's fundamentally true. But I've heard it so many times it makes me go, well, I'm going to ask someone who's been through Stanford's business school. So, Alan, you say you learned that at a class in Stanford. I'm going, that's amazing. But I've also heard that one of the tactics they'll teach in business school at Stanford is that in the last 24 hours to renegotiate the deal because they're emotionally invested and you're going to get a huge chunk of money off. Is that true? Do you ever
No.
remember being taught that tactic? Is that just a rumor just to make business schools sound cold-hearted?
No, we're not taught. I took the negotiation class. The class Alan's talking about is called interpersonal dynamics. Everyone calls it touchy-feely. But both were really good classes. The touchy-feely class messed me up because I got so focused on feelings that I told them, like, you got to like put a warning label on this because when you go in the real world, you're going to get smoked. I remember my first lender at Bonnie Plumbing, I was like, guys, thank you for investing. It was one of our other, it wasn't Bridge Bank. It was this other, I had a mezzanine lender. And I was like, I feel so nervous and gosh, I really appreciate it. And they basically saw that and they just like punched me in the face like the rest of the way because I was weak. So, but no, they don't teach that. I mean, that is a very common tactic in private equity is to say, I'm going to pay you $100 and know behind the scenes, the goal is $80. And then you just look for ways to basically like punch down the price. And I mean, what we've lost a lot of deals at Flint. I've lost them personally. Where I just say like, hey, here's the price. And when we say this, we're like, if if your profit is like 5 to 10% within range of whatever you've told us it is, this is the price. If you're off by, you know, if it's $100 and it's 95, it's fine. This is the price. But like, and we close. And if it's not, we won't even renegotiate. We'll say, hey, why don't we just rethink about this? And if you want us to offer you a lower price, we will. But otherwise, we're just not going to do it. We're not going to retrade. And we've lost deals for that because somebody else offers $120 and in the end they paid 90 and we would have paid 100. Like, but they're already so far down the line and they spent money with lawyers and they've been through diligence and they're exhausted and scared. And so, and it's hard. I mean, inertia is a thing. And when you have the inertia with someone else, that's also like, I've never used an earn out. That's where, you know, where someone says they'll pay you more later if you hit these targets, because I think I spend a lot of time focused on financial incentives and aligning financial incentives where if it works really well for you, it's going to work well for me. Because I think when those get misaligned, it creates a ton of friction. And earn out, like the minute you close, there is some incentive for me to make sure you don't get the earn out. And there's all incentive for you to make sure you do. So we might want to hire a controller and you might not want to because you won't get your earn out. Well, the company might need a controller. I just don't want to create scenarios like that.
Colin, I think you said the next 10 years will reward those who can lead, not just scale. What trends are you watching most closely today in the home services space?
I mean, I'm fascinated to see how it's going to work out for the 80 groups that got into the space, because a lot of them came in. We started Flint in 19. We bought 5 companies in the first 18 months. And I think we ended up having 6 or 7, and we were like 60 or 70 million of EBIT or of revenue, and we grew to 160. And so Trevor Flanagan, who's my partner in Flint, is one of the best operators I've ever met. He's a great leader. But we both fundamentally believe, like, we love the trades, we understand the culture, and we want to grow organically. We want to grow as a company. And I think there are a lot of people who got in this space. They saw wrench sell for 200 and 750. They saw some of the other early entrants buy a bunch of stuff, put it all together, and then sell it for a much bigger price. And they were in and out in like 2 years. And then suddenly that wind, and like Trevor and I kept looking at it being like, this is so weird. We're doing all these hard things and we're making the companies better and we're moving into bigger buildings and we're hiring more people. We're actually having EBITDA profit go down because we're investing for the future to support the growth. Meanwhile, these people are doing nothing. They're just buying a bunch of stuff and then flipping it. And I was like, they're crazy. And then after it kept working, I was like, well, shoot, like maybe we're crazy. Well, but we just kept doing our way, the way that worked. And then what happened is that the flip option just went away. Like in like 2022 or 21, interest rates went up. A couple of the companies weren't performing real well. And like I always said, like, someone's going to get left holding the bag. And now there are people left holding the bag right now. And they've done the stuff that private equity firms do. They've cut out costs. They've moved everyone to Service Titan. You know, they've done some stuff. They've hired CROs, CMOs, CTO. I mean, all these C people that cost a fortune. And they're stuck. And I'm just fascinated to see what happens, because I think they didn't really want to own a home service company. They sure as shit didn't want to own like 50 of them for like 5, 7, 8 years, and they're stuck. So I'll be really curious how that works for them.
I gotta be totally candid. I'm really happy that we're having this talk. You almost backed out, but the reason why I'm happy is that you're actually just saying things that I know I believe in. I believe Alan believes in it, and I think people need to hear them. That they're very closely aligned to my values. In a world where private equity just doesn't give 2 shits about my values, for the most part. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yep, that's probably true. I don't think it makes them bad people. I just think they respond to their own financial incentives.
They just don't care about the long term.
No, they don't. But again, I try and couch it in like the financial incentives, right? I mean, their goal is to build a bigger and bigger private equity firm. And the way to do that is to buy and sell things well as fast as possible. And I don't think that it, and again, it's providing opportunities for sellers to sell. And, I don't think it's great for our industry, but,
That's the other
you
thing.
know,
You're not apart from, and I think that's what this has made obvious to me, is that you are not apart from and separate of. You are part of, and that's good, because I don't honestly feel like a lot of the upper echelon, and I don't know a lot of the upper echelon. I'm only witnessing their actions and their behaviors. I don't think they think they're a part of. It's a financial play, which is totally respectable. That's their business.
Mm-hmm.
You're a part of. So to me, it sort of gives you a little insider street cred, in my opinion.
yeah, I've been around plumbing and air conditioning since 2008. So you got to pick up a little bit. I still can't fix anything. The one time I tried to fix my own toilet, it blew up the next day. But yeah, so
Colin, what kind of companies do you think will win in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the ones who are built the right way. It's going to be interesting because a lot of the great operators, um, are now part of these big groups, and I think I think it's really hard to run a big home service company. Um, they're challenging, right? I think one time I remember I said to you, "Man, we're having like a boatload of problems this year with people," and you said, "Well, I don't think we're having more problems. We're just 3 times bigger. So we have like the same rate of problems. We just have like 3 times as many problems." And I was like, "Oh yeah." So I think they're really hard. I think the companies that have a strong uh, growth plan on an individualized basis for each company are going to win. I think we did Flint the right way, which is the way I learned from Bonnie and Abacus and Paul Kelly at Parker and Sons, and which is, you invest in the people, you expand your market share, you just grow in your market. Flint grew 28%. This is just growth in their existing markets. In 28% in 23, which is the year we sold. 38% last year. And this year we're really off. We're up 12. Well, like the whole market's like flat, maybe up like 3 or 4%. The good ones are doing fine. Stuff still breaks. But a lot of people haven't seen a downturn. They haven't seen interest rates go up. They haven't seen tariffs. And so I think there are still really good companies, but I think a lot of people, uh, we just run differently. Like we believe that the technicians are like the most important people. Everything else is overhead. When we were 160 million, we had 4 people at corporate, and I was one of them. So we don't have like this massive corporate juggernaut that's like trying to oversee all the stuff, because then you just make bad decisions for the customer, for the people. So I think, and once you've created that corporate juggernaut, Trevor always says like no one's like not doing anything. So they're like, well, you don't need half these people. Like, well, they're doing something. So how do you get rid of all the? So I think it's hard to unwind that. And then the companies become dependent on it, or the corporations do. I think it's going to be fascinating to see.
Colin, if you were starting fresh today, where would you place your next bet?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't have like I didn't think roofing would become like what it is. I didn't think plumbing would. My goals are just different. So if you said, hey, can you pick the next group, like the next thing that's going to have a bajillion people trying to buy it for prices that are way too high? I don't think so. I think I probably could, I'd probably go buy a $7 or $10 million company. And I'm affiliated with a landscaping company that's on the East Coast that I think I could make a lot better if it was closer. I just don't want to um, there's an arbor care company around here that I think is just awesome. Owners are great. And I think there's like 3 levers we could pull to make it bigger. So I don't know. I'd probably find something to do. I just like being in the businesses. So I'd probably look for something like that. But I don't have like a next great option. And I don't really have to. I think I'm still a pretty big shareholder at Flint and the chairman of that, and then I own Guardian, and so everything else has to be better than those two things, and I haven't really found anything that is.
Do you have more than $15,000 now?
I do.
Okay,
Slightly
Yeah.
more.
That's
Yeah.
good. I was a little
Yeah.
worried,
Yeah.
but I'm
Yeah.
feeling better about it now.
It was pretty. Yeah, it became real when you have a baby. I mean, I remember when I first took my first job in San Francisco, I found a spreadsheet from when I was like 24. I was making like 65 grand and my rent was like, I don't know, 1,200 or 1,700. And like I did all my expenses, I got my income and I did all my expenses. And at the end it showed negative 1,200 per month. And all I wrote next to it was, uh-oh. And I just closed it. Like I didn't actually like figure out the problem. I just closed the file and pretended it existed. So yeah, it's good math.
Yeah.
So, Alan, I got one last question, then we'll wrap it up.
All right.
Collin, are you glad you didn't ditch this episode after all?
Yes. It's been fun to see you. I
So
mean,
I'll see you, Collin.
I'm trying to think when I met you, maybe when you're doing training for Alan.
I think that would
so.
have been, yeah.
Yeah.
That would have been when.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very intimidated by you.
By me?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Because I only knew a few things, which was you just bought Abacus and you had on a nice outfit and I was fat in a technician uniform and you were in shape and running after a heart attack. And I'm going, oh, no, this guy scares me. I'm less intimidated by
And
people now.
you thought he had more than $15,000.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
We could have had real good conversations if we just would have been like, hey, let's look at bank accounts and been like, yeah, we're both sort of in shitty positions, but they're getting better.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, those were fun times. I mean, I didn't sleep a ton, but it was fun.
They were good times. I still got I've got a ton of pictures of the early days and getting to meet Bob and
Bob.
Billy Bostick and a bunch of guys. They're still in my life, so it's awesome. So I really appreciate you, Collin. This is probably the most refreshing one I think we've done so far.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, really good.
Thank you, Collin.
Oh yeah. It was so nice to see you both.
Let's catch up, Collin.
Hey, thanks so much for watching the show this week. Head over to toddliles.com/mindset to get the show notes. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and follow so you never miss a new episode of the show. And if you enjoyed this episode, then share it. It really helps us get the word out. You've been watching the $100 Million Mindset with Alan O'Neill and Toad Licker Todd Liles.